You know, I think that's an interesting article. I think it's dishonest and a bit facile to say don't pay attention to his words because, you know, words do matter when you're the President of the United States, and whether it's the sort of flamethrower that he's aiming at his opponents and critics domestically or at his allies overseas, you know, these words have consequences and they have effects. But I think more broadly, if you read through this piece, and she's a representative, I think, of Republicans overseas, it does really sort of sum up the bargain that the Republican Party has done with Trump. And she basically says so explicitly, which is that, you know, they're sort of willing to put up with this kind of politics of personal insult and the crass behavior and the anti-immigration you know, rhetoric, the dehumanizing of immigrants and all of that stuff. And in exchange, she sort of goes through the things they're getting, which is the big tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, which is the, you know, most recently the sort of hard right Supreme Court nominee, quite likely to heavily restrict not only abortion rights, but, you know, ability to protect voting rights and to, you know, pretty significantly limit the government's ability to regulate. So in some sense, on the surface, he is very much not a conventional president, and in some very consequential ways, he's breaking the mold. But he's also delivering for the Republican Party on a lot of their agenda.
And Freddie has this habit of going in tough and then claiming victory, where some people say actually it doesn't change that much.
Well, it's often more pageantry than substance, really. But I mean, politics is pageantry to a large extent.
What do you reckon to this meeting with the Queen that Steve Bell's depicted?
I think I would love to have heard the whole conversation. I think I mean, our Queen has had to do a lot of things for her country, but
well, it hasn't happened yet. It's
well, I mean, but I'd love to be on that conversation, and I think that she I mean, I think she'll have to suck up a lot of his vulgarity and try and deal with it.
I mean, some suggestion, people are speculating that actually in private she'll probably get the better of him and tear him off a string.
Well, who knows? Certainly, we would all love to be a fly on the wall in that conversation, and with his private meetings with Theresa May after this interview in The Sun this morning. I think Theresa May has really, you know, learned how Donald Trump treats people who are loyal to him, and I think she might have found out as much had she spoken to some of the former aides of his that have ended up, you know, in jail or under investigation and been sort of thrown over the side by him.
I'm not sure we should underestimate his ability to flatter. I think the Queen may end up quite liking him.
What do you reckon to the argument, though, the impact of him saying this? Does he benefit the sort of hard Brexiter cause, or does he, in fact, sort of undermine it to a certain extent? I
think the Tory party is riven. It's split on Brexit, and Trump rather neatly exposes it. I mean, now you are either with Trump on Brexit, or you're with May. And the Tory party needs to decide which way it's going to go on that. And I think it's rather helpful that he exposes that division.
I don't know who it helps, but I think this is what Trump does. He finds the dividing lines in a society. At home, it's often around issues of race and immigration. He sticks the crowbar in, and he
well, let's
kind
not
of.
Forget,
And
in this article, he's gone on the interview. He's gone on immigration. He's gone on the NHS.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's no issue more divisive in British politics right now than Brexit. And he's sort of, you know, choose your metaphor, whether it's the crowbar or throwing petrol on the fire. He's trying to sort of, you know, take advantage and exacerbate some of those dividing lines. And whether it advantages, you know, a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit, I think it's pretty clear that it has the effect of pretty severely undermining Theresa May, who's his host and supposedly ally here.
I mean, your editor, your boss, I suppose, Fraser Nelson, is writing saying that this is splitting the Tory party.
Excellent column.
I somehow got the impression he wasn't quite clear which way he would throw the Spectator in this civil war.
I think, well, you've put me on the spot there. I think there's an element of support for what Theresa May is doing among even quite hard leavers. But I think it's a very difficult position she's in, and the Tory party is in a crisis. And I think a lot of people want to sort of sit back and see what happens.
And what about Boris Johnson, your editor for Prime Minister?
I think he'd make a great Prime Minister.
You do?
I agree with Donald Trump. Entirely.
I think Donald Trump sees a kindred spirit there in Johnson. No, you know, shared willingness to sort of twist the facts and bluster through.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed. Well, this